Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. We are almost there. The NBA season is just about here, and my goodness, bring on the drama. The Ben Simmons situation has hit a whole new level. We've got a veteran player who's retiring. We've got some players who are returning from injury, all kinds of stuff to dive into. But we got to start with this Ben Simmons talk and everything that's going on now because, wow, we knew this might get worse. This is worse than I thought it was going to get. Keith, how are you doing? And are you prepared to dive into more Ben Simmons drama?
I'm doing well, and yeah, I'm prepared to dive into it every day until it's resolved because it seems like that's going to be what we're going to do. If we had more production on the show, we'd have like a Ben Simmons alert and like
A
flashing
siren.
graphics and stuff like that, and yeah, exactly, all sorts of things like that. But yeah, so the latest news that came out today, Mark Stein, yesterday I believe it was, said Simmons was still holding fast that he wasn't going to report, and then Woj reported similarly, but added on, Ben Simmons has let the 76ers know he's never going to wear their jersey again. And then Kyle Newbeck, who's a Philadelphia-based reporter, added to the fire by saying someone within the organization said the way for Ben to fix this is to fire Rich Paul and Clutch Sports and say, yeah, that was just a stupid idea my agent came up with. That's not going to happen. And this is just it's just an absolute disaster. And I continue to believe we're recording this on Tuesday, the 21st. We're a week away from training camp opening. We're less than a week from media day. They're really on the clock here. They've got about 5 days to get this thing done,
Mhm.
or it is going to be an absolute circus that they do not want every day that he remains on that roster, but out of camp, because that's going to be the number one question, lead story, everything asked, no matter how many times they say we're not talking about it.
Well, here's the thing, right? And we've talked about Ben Simmons a bunch on this show because since the beginning of the YouTube channel here, which by the way, everybody should definitely subscribe to. Cheap plug there. But since the beginning of our YouTube channel, really the Ben Simmons story has been kind of at the forefront of everything. But
Yeah,
and some people have even said, "Oh my gosh, you guys have talked Ben Simmons too much." These are some major changes in what's happening here because number one, him saying he's not going to put on a 76 jersey. There had been some hope in
that's
Philadelphia that
new.
okay,
Yep.
maybe he doesn't show up to training camp. You know, he stomps his feet a little bit. He's not happy about the situation, makes that known, but opening night, he puts on the jersey and he goes out there and he plays well, and that rehabs some of his trade value. And then you can find a deal from there. If he plays, I don't know, the first month of the season, whatever it is, he plays for the 76ers, plays well and well enough to where the offers increase and the 76ers find a deal. That's clearly not
Yep.
happening now. That is out the window. Will not take place if he is just saying, nope, I refuse to put on a 76ers jersey. And then the report from inside the 76ers about firing Rich Paul. And we've heard the rumors that Tyrese
Yeah.
Maxey could need to be added into a Ben Simmons deal in order to rid the franchise of Clutch Sports clients. And Rich Paul potentially wanting Tyrese Maxey out of Philadelphia as well because they're done with them. This is setting up to be, and maybe it's already at this point, the city of Philadelphia versus Clutch Sports. Like this is bigger now than just Ben Simmons. This is an NBA franchise taking on an agent, arguably maybe the most powerful agent in sports right now, or at least in basketball. I mean, this is going to a whole new level, Keith.
Yeah, it's clearly this is the most powerful agency in professional basketball, probably approaching it in professional sports. I know, gosh, I can't, his name escapes me now, but there's the baseball, Scott Boris, the
Mm-hmm.
baseball guy. It seems like every major free agent he has in his clientele. But yeah, it is, this is, it's ugly and it's going to continue to be ugly. It's going to be a mess. Uh, I know people are tired of it, but as long as there is actual something new, we are going to talk about it. And the new update was today,
Yeah.
which had not been said before, that he will not play for them again. The idea of adding Maxi in, we'll see. I'm not fully sold that that's really a thing. And if that happens, Philly has to get a point guard back. He's their only player left after Simmons that can create offense off the dribble
Yeah.
with regularity and can really set the offense. They don't have another guy because remember this team didn't carry a traditional point guard because Ben Simmons was their de facto offense, and it wasn't he was their offense initiator and de facto point guard. And the point guard sized player on the roster is Seth Curry, who is not a point guard. He's a shooter, and he's one of the best ones in the league. But yeah, it's a mess. And quite frankly, I don't know, where we're going to go to with this, how it's going to resolve. And, Philly might be kind of hurting here a little bit until this thing gets finished up. And people continue to throw John Wall out there and all
Yeah,
this other stuff. But,
that doesn't solve any problems.
I don't, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure that's where this goes necessarily. I continue to think that it's going to be somewhere else. I know Minnesota and Cleveland, they were waiting for this part, for this kind of domino to get knocked over of I'm not coming and I'm really not coming, and then to go to I'm not ever playing for you again. And they were waiting on that, because now they can swoop in with those offers that didn't seem good enough before. They might start to seem a little bit better here over the next week or so.
Well, and that's exactly why Philadelphia fans are so frustrated. In the city of Philadelphia, I mean, you've seen some of the outrage that's been out there on social media, are so frustrated because as a fan of the franchise, you don't want this situation. You want, if you're going to trade your young star, and okay, we can quibble over the word star, but your young player that's very, very talented, you want a top return. And what's happening is that return is just getting diminished and diminished and diminished. So from the fan perspective that thinks team first, that's frustrating. From Ben Simmons' perspective, he's frustrated with the way that he's been treated by the franchise. And of course, there's fans who say Ben Simmons is at fault for not working on his game more, for not being willing to shoot, for passing up that dunk. All of these sorts of things. It's all become this big jumbled mess. But let's just hone in real quick on the 76ers perspective here. So right now, they're in a situation where they can either accept an offer that's out there, and maybe that offer is something that they wouldn't have considered good enough a few weeks ago. As we get closer, their feet get held to the fire a little bit more. Maybe they finally say, okay, and they accept an offer from Minnesota or whoever. But let's say, and this is, we usually don't see teams do this. Let's say they say, Ben Simmons, you are not going to win on a matter of principle. We're sitting you out. Where does this go from there? Where does that path lead? Because that is the path that we tend to not go down in these situations.
Well, and that was the kind of other newish update from Woj today, was that Simmons is prepared to give up the money. He's not worried about that part of it. And that you kind of knew that if he was willing to sit out, but to see it plainly stated like that, that is very clear. And this is a situation for sure that this is coming from the player and from the from the agency, and that it is not coming from the team in this case, because the team wouldn't have that knowledge. So it's not headed anywhere good. One, it's going to cost Simmons a ton of money. Philly in no way gets any kind of cap or tax relief out of this. It's a team levied fine. It is not a league levied fine and suspension. So there's nothing that goes to help them there. They get no kind of exception to sign. This isn't an injured player or anything like that. So what happens here is it costs Simmons a ton of money, and Philly's left basically with a hole in the roster, which if you go to the basketball side of things, which is ultimately what really matters here, they're much weaker on the court, because if you trade them, at least hopefully you got something good in return that can replace some of the production you lost. If you just sit them out and say, that's fine, don't come, and we're going to continue to bury you here, then you're really in a tough spot, because you just don't have your you don't have anything to replace him on the roster, and it's just a dead roster spot that's in there. It's no different than a player who's out with an injury, except that sometimes if the player is out with an injury, one, they might come back, or two, if you know they're out, you can at least get one of the disabled player exceptions and go try to replace them, something like that. This situation just leaves you sitting without it, and you just gotta wait.
So let's zoom out. And let's look at this from Adam Silver's perspective. What's going on here from the NBA's perspective? This doesn't look good for the league, right?
No.
To have a young star in this situation, setting up for franchise versus potentially an agency. How does the NBA react to this, if at all?
Yeah, I don't know that they do much about it. I think they're gonna leave it to Philadelphia will process this. The no pun
Mhm.
intended, because it's Philly in process. But Philadelphia will
Trust the
handle
process.
this. However, they will handle this. I don't think the league is going to get involved here unless it becomes clear that Philly is just saying, "Hey, we're not going to trade this guy. We've gotten amazing offers and those kind of things." Then maybe the NBA kind of comes back and says, um, all right, hey, what are we doing here? But I think that would be more of a behind the scenes, behind closed doors thing of like, hey, come on, let's be
Mhm.
smart, let's get this thing moving, let's all move along here, versus the league stepping in any way, because I just don't think that's the league doesn't generally do that. And I know a bunch of people scream and yell about the Chris Paul trade.
Mhm.
That was different. The league owned the team at that time. It was a different situation
And the
than this
league
one
hates the
is.
Lakers.
But
That's why.
yeah, the league hates the Lakers. Yep. But yeah, my guess is this just turns into, hey, we're just gonna sit and wait it out and
Mhm.
see where it goes.
Yeah, it's going to be, again, something to keep an eye on. The clock is ticking. We'll see. Do the 76ers get a deal done? Do they get something that is acceptable for them to make a
Yep.
move here? Does Ben Simmons find his way out? Do we go into the season with Ben Simmons not in uniform for the 76ers and stuck sitting at home? We'll see
Well,
what ends
we
up happening.
definitely go into the season with him not in uniform for the Philadelphia
Not for the
76ers.
76ers. I mean, not
We
on the
know
court at
that.
all,
Is he
but
yeah, not
yeah,
on the court at all? Let's see. Maybe.
yeah. We'll see where this goes and what kind of precedent this sets moving forward
Sure.
for future situations like this. And I think that's where the NBA has to really be concerned here is, are we going to go down this path in the future? There's already this perception, right? Like I see it when a player signs with Clutch Sports, whatever team they're with, that team's fan base tends to react negatively, right? Because
Hmm.
they're just seen as the organization that or the agency that you sign with in order to get out of someplace. That's right or wrong. That's just kind of been the perception among fans around the NBA. And you can argue for Clutch
Sure.
Sports, you can argue against, right? But it's going to be interesting to see if this is something that pops up more and more often where we see this kind of showdown because again Ben Simmons is under contract for 4 years. This isn't like the Anthony Davis situation where they tried to tell the Pelicans, look, he's going to leave when he's a free agent. Let's just keep this quiet. It
Hmm.
didn't get kept quiet, and then it all blew up, right? This isn't like
Yeah.
that sort of situation where the player's going to be a free agent soon. Ben Simmons has 4 years under contract. So this is going to be a really interesting power struggle to watch, not just for right now, but for the precedent that it's going to set moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I'll state it slightly different as everybody sees, especially if it's a star player. It's just they signed with Clutch to get to the Lakers. And the reality is Clutch has far more players that don't play for the Lakers in the league
Yeah,
than do. And now people will come back, well, because they only have 15 roster spots. And guess what? There are players on the Lakers who aren't represented by Clutch.
yeah.
Believe it or not. I know as crazy as that
Crazy.
may sound, but there's several of them. So yeah, it's I don't the league is not going to overreact to one player doing this. If this turns into somebody else does it, then it's going to be a problem.
Mhm.
And that's going to be where it's going to be, all right, well, what are we doing here now? Because this is not what we're intended. And then it becomes something that it'll get addressed in the CBA talks and all those kind of things of, all right, how do we stop all this nonsense from continuing forward the way it is?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, let's move on to a sunnier story here. JJ Redick, great career, has decided to hang them up and retire. Originally, we had heard that, or he had said that he was going to look at maybe coming back midway through the season, signing on with the team. Instead, he
Yep.
decided, you know what? I'm not going to do it anymore. I am going to retire. And you know what? I always applaud a player that's able to go out on their own terms, isn't trying for that last gasp. If he's made the decision that he's going to prioritize being with family and he's going to go ahead and leave the game, great career for JJ Redick and happy for him. And hopefully that's a decision that he's at peace with.
Yeah, it sounds like there was a little bit going into that. He did mention he's going to have an Achilles
Mhm.
surgery. In the announcement, he said that is something he's going to have to get cleaned up to be just to be able to be healthy non-basketball wise. So that might have been something that may have factored in. But for the most part, he said, I just, between the pandemic and being home and all these other things, he said, I just, I want to be home and I want to be there for my wife and I want to be there for my boys. And 15-year career for JJ Redick, his teams, although he did not play last year for the Mavericks, his teams were in the postseason 14 of those 15 years, which is pretty cool. And other than the first two where he wasn't a big part of those first two Magic teams, he was a big part of all the rest of those teams getting into the postseason. So, great career for him. One of the best shooters the game's ever seen. Finishes at 41.5% career 3-point percentage. So just, unbelievable. And one of the all-time tough shot makers. His ability to come flying off a screen, get square, and get a good look. Unreal. Just it is unbelievable just how quick it was. And so yeah, he should feel good about his career and where things stood and all that stuff. So yeah, so I apologize, I know I'm a little distracted. I keep looking at my screen here because I'm trying to see what Leeds is doing versus Fulham in the Carabao Cup. They're in penalties. In the first round of penalties finished tied. Ooh. So they're now into extra penalties. So it's a little stressful for this here Leeds fan. So I am, I will do my best to make sure I stay focused in here.
That is totally fair. Drama and more drama from Ben Simmons to PKs. We're here for all of it. Yep. Look, you've got Ben Simmons who's on his way out. A couple other players are not going to be leaving anytime soon. Sean Marks from the Brooklyn Nets says they're confident that they're going to be signing Kyrie Irving and James Harden.
Leeds won.
Hey, there you go. Congratulations.
They win.
All right.
They advance. They move on.
Nice.
Yeah.
There it is.
All right. Back to Sean Marks and the Brooklyn Nets.
Sean Marks and the Brooklyn Nets. Looks like Kyrie and James Harden, they're confident they are going to get those deals done, those extensions done, and keep those guys around for the long term. Not a surprise at all, but still good to hear from the Brooklyn perspective that they are going to be able to keep their big three together for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, if you remember back, Kevin Durant already signed his extension. They want to get that done with both Irving and Harden. Sounds like, as you said, Sean Marks feels confident that they'll get that done. A couple other interesting points made from that team as Marks and Nash did some media availability today. Steve Nash being the head coach, they said they embraced that they're the favorites and said they get it and that they feel like they should be the favorites. So it's almost refreshing when a team doesn't kind of, it's tough. Yeah. There's a lot of good teams and, all those things. And they're not saying anybody else isn't good or anything like that. They're saying what I think we all know. Because if they said anything else, we'd all be like, yeah, right, whatever. There is something refreshing about owning up to that. I think two other interesting points that are more interesting than maybe anything else. The first was they mentioned that it was that they're still looking at a big role for Nick Claxton playing for this team. And that was interesting considering they added LaMarcus Aldridge and Paul Millsap this offseason, who are both more 5s than 4s now, and that they added or re-signed Blake Griffin, who they brought in previously, but Claxton sounds like he's still going to play pretty regularly. So I think that part is really good to hear. But this is now, we've talked about this as something to keep an eye on. They did say that if practice started today, there would have been a few players, they didn't say an exact number or any names, who would not be able to participate because of the local mandates, rules, regulations, whatever they may be in New York, that would not be able to participate due to vaccination status. So that is just something we got to keep an eye on here, because that's something where we'll learn a lot more, because the first time there is an actual training camp and they give an update on who practiced and who didn't, that's when we'll find out who maybe isn't going to be there, or they've got to figure something out. So we'll see what that looks like, but just something to keep an eye on. And
something we'll also have to keep an eye on with the Golden State Warriors, and they actually had an injury update. A couple of injury updates on James Wiseman and Klay Thompson, both of them progressing. Klay does expect to return at some point during this season. We don't know exactly when. We've heard maybe December, something like that out there. The Warriors are not going to rush him back. James Wiseman still progressing from that MCL. Again, nothing definitive on when either one's coming back, but just good to hear that both are making progress towards a return.
Yeah, so Klay Thompson, it just because of the messed up
Yeah.
calendar last year, he tore his right Achilles on November 25th. Just as we're kind of resetting ourselves, that's generally about a year-long injury, maybe a little bit on the a year and a month or
Hmm.
so, which is why I think everybody's kind of been saying, yeah, right around Christmas. They did say he will participate in various controlled drills during training camp. His return to full practices will be determined at a later date. So yeah, just he'll be there. He'll be going through stuff, but he's not quite ready yet. And then James Wiseman, he had a surgery on April 15th. So kind of with about a month to go in the season again with the weird calendar.
Hmm.
And he will return for the 21-22 season. Exact time frame will be based on his continued progress and rehab. He is expected to begin full jumping 6 months from the surgery date, which would be October 15th. So that's a few days ahead of opening night.
Hmm.
So probably looking at for Wiseman, it's probably going to be then, I would guess 2-3 weeks, maybe beyond that. So I would say early to mid-November is what we're looking at for Wiseman to be back. But a couple, big rotation players for the Warriors, and we'll see where they go without those guys. But clearly not going to have either one of them to open the season.
Right, and obviously they kick things off against the Lakers on opening night. The James Wiseman thing actually is interesting because the Warriors are one of the teams right now that we're looking at as, okay, if we were to make tiers, they're not in the top tier in the West, but they've got the
Mhm.
ability to jump into that top tier because they've got the trade assets to potentially do so. And maybe they're a name that even gets into the mix here with Ben Simmons. We'll see what happens. But James Wiseman getting back out on the floor and proving that he's healthy and can be effective, that's not going to hurt his trade value at all. So
Nope.
I know that's something they're going to be looking forward to. So if he's able to come back and be effective, it might not mean that he stays with the Warriors if the opportunity presents itself for them to flip some of these young guys, and maybe Wiseman is included. They may be able to go land a win now piece that pushes them up towards the upper echelon of the Western Conference.
Yeah, and if you're a fantasy basketball player with less than a month to go before your drafts
Hmm.
might get heated up here, keep an eye on Jordan Poole. Probably will play even more until Klay Thompson comes back. And up front, let's see what they do. This is why you went out and got Nemanja Bjelica and Otto Porter.
Hmm.
And my guess is Kevon Looney probably
Yeah.
starts, but that's probably one of those start, play 5 minutes, and then see you later kind of thing. And then they mix and match with Bjelica and Green and everybody else, with that. So, and then Wiseman will be back in the mix eventually there, and whether that helps them immediately on the court or, as you said, just trade value and boosting that up, that could be a thing as well.
Indeed. All right, I'm taking one last look around here, seeing if anything else crazy happened while we were discussing here. I'm not seeing too much, so fingers
No,
crossed.
Quinn Cook. We
Oh,
mentioned he was in a
he worked
workout
out for the
with the
Warriors.
Warriors. He was going to be in a full longer workout group. He's not going to be because he's signing with the Portland Trailblazers.
Oh, okay.
So he is going to join the Trailblazers on a camp deal. Here, non-guaranteed contract. Portland added a ton of veteran guys this offseason to these very low risk, no guaranteed, non-guaranteed
Hmm.
contracts here. So we'll see what comes of that. But and then we wanted to get into the salary cap stuff
Yes.
that but my good buddy Morton Jensen of Forbes got into, and one of the things that he mentioned is we all know we've talked about it on this show. There's a new TV contract coming. It's expected to be a heavy multi-billion-dollar television deal that the NBA will land. People can scream and yell about ratings and all these other things,
Right.
but it's live sports are still the big thing people and networks are paying for. So, but Mort's reporting was that teams are prepping scenarios where it could be as much as a salary cap of 171 million in a few years. Now, I think that remains extremely unlikely. I think what will happen is, and I've expected this all along, is that the NBA and the Players Association would agree to some form of smoothing this time around, because the big lesson they learned last time is if you don't smooth, the spike helps exactly one group of free agents. They're the ones who are going to get paid. Nobody else will. And teams are going to spend, partially because they have to spend 90% of the cap. So they're going to spend a whole bunch of money. And then that's when you end up with these contracts for guys who are, they're not quite so good. Promise I'm not rubbing salt in the wound, but that's how you end up with Moskov and Deng type deals. You've won a championship since then, so I don't care if you still get angry about it.
No, hey, we're all looking forward to next year when Deng is no longer on the Lakers books, and we don't have to see that that's still sitting there. Then we can move past it.
all who wear purple and yellow are looking forward to that. Or I'm sorry, for blue and gold.
There you go.
Purple and yellow in normal terms. But it is it's one of those things where I think it's you're going to see some smoothing come, because nobody wants to see that happen again. Everybody wants to see it be, all right, let's spread the wealth here. Let's take care of this. And what they'll do is they'll put mechanisms in there to make sure, hey, we're going to make sure everybody gets this money still, because it's not going to be one of those things where, all right, well, what happened to it? It's going to be in there, but that'll be a big part of the next CBA negotiations, which is summer of 2022. Or not summer, December of 2022. Both sides can give notice to the other that they intend to opt out of the current CBA, which would then take effect with the 23-24 season. So you'll see that happen, but it's not expected to be, a major, acrimonious negotiations that shut the league down or anything like that. You may hear, the league locked out or something like that, just because that tends to be how these things go. But it should not be a thing where we're sitting there twiddling our thumbs waiting for basketball a year later. It should go, hopefully, knock on wood, relatively smoothly.
So the cap smoothing idea would be, rather than have I don't know, we don't know exactly what the cap would be in, say, 2024, and let's say it jumps up to 2025. So let's say it's a $50 million jump, right, in terms of cap room.
Yeah.
What you would do is, rather than have that $50 million jump, it would be, I don't know, a $15 million jump, and then the next year would jump another 15, and then, and so you would kind of, you would break it up over the years. But again, that money is still coming in, and so how you divide that up would be something that the league would have to figure out, because it can't be a situation where the owners say, okay, well, the cap really, we smoothed it, so it only jumps up by 15 million, say, just to throw a number out there this year, and then the owners just get to keep all the extra. They would have to figure out something with that, because the players would still be entitled to that. You'd have to figure out some way to make that work. But in terms of just the salary cap and the free agent market, I don't think you want to see what happened before, when the players rejected cap smoothing, where, like you said, you had guys get these crazy contracts. And a lot of people at the time, I remember when the Deng and Mozgov contracts, and there were others as well, when those all came out, there were a lot of people that just said, oh, well, this is just the new normal now. And what happened was teams overestimated what the new normal was. And so they offered contracts that even under the new reality of an increased salary cap they were still bad. They still wound up looking bad, and it was not the new normal. And then on top of that, you also created the environment where a superstar like Kevin Durant was able to go join a stacked team already, the Golden State Warriors, that had won 73 games the season before, because suddenly even the Warriors had cap space. And that's not what the CBA or the salary cap is set up to do. Yeah,
it's set up to create an even playing field for all 30 teams where they can do that. Now, we know that's not really how it works, because some ownership groups are willing to go hundreds of millions of dollars into the luxury tax, and others are not. So that's a different story. That's ownership's willingness to spend. That is not on the CBA itself. The CBA rules work exactly the same for all 30 teams. It's just some teams have inherent advantages. It's like, you covering the Lakers, LA's a place where a lot of players live and a lot of players want to be. I live in Florida. A lot of guys live here. A lot of guys like being in Miami and even in Orlando. And, people laugh at the Orlando stuff, but Orlando has a history of landing some pretty good free agents when they've had cap space and they've had a fairly decent team to do it with, and those kind of things. Players, if there's ever a team in Las Vegas, guys are going to flock to that team because so many guys live there in the offseason and work out there. So it's there you go.
I won't leave the Lakers, but I will flock to Vegas to go and see that team. Maybe when the Lakers play in Vegas, I will be there.
I am hopeful there'll be a team in Seattle to
Yes.
go check out again, and that there needs to be, but
Come on,
that's a
Clippers,
whole
just
separate
go. Just make
podcast
it
that we could
happen.
do. That's not going to
No,
happen.
it's not.
Not now. Not that
No, they're
they've got the
building a
new
new arena.
shiny arena being built.
That's right.
But yeah, this is all set up to keep everybody on even playing ground and make sure it's all good. So yeah, the cap smoothing got rejected last time because it kind of came quickly. I don't think the way it was being explained was very good. I think everybody, rightly so, had doubts of, wait, are we ever going to get this money and those kind of things. So I get it. I understand why people backed off, but we'll see. How this comes together here over the next several years. It's going to be the next 3-4 years at least that this will all be speculated on and bandied about, and then we'll get numbers and we'll go from there. One thing I will say is
Mhm.
keep an eye on extensions and new contracts for players. If they seem a little richer and you're like, man, that team in 4 years is going to be deep into the tax, maybe not,
Might not
because
be.
they may be looking at it and saying it's not going to be quite as bad as it might have been previous. So that's just another thing to kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah. Yep. Certainly something to consider as new contracts start to come out, particularly when we start looking at like next off season and things like that. So definitely
Yep.
something to keep an eye on as we progress forward. But yeah, it sounds like a big new deal is coming, and that NBA salary cap is going to be going up, whether there's cap smoothing or not.
Sure is. Yep, absolutely. And then the last thing I think we wanted to cover was
Hmm.
a slight injury update from Jaylen Brown.
Oh,
Gave an injury update in a piece. He gave an exclusive interview to Mark Spears of The Undefeated. And it was a really good interview, touched on a lot of different topics, both basketball, social justice wise, some of the things Brown is doing in the Boston area as well to help out underprivileged youths, which is pretty cool. But he's not just giving money. He's giving them work to do too, which I think is pretty cool too. That he really is trying to make sure everybody is being taken care of, but they got to work for it as well. But basketball wise, what we primarily tend to focus on here, he gave an update that he hopes to be ready for the start of training camp from off-season wrist surgery. He said some days it feels better than others, which is to be expected.
hmm.
But we'll see. I think the Celtics probably going to take it easy with him. I don't know that we'll see him play necessarily right away on opening night or not, but it sounds like he's at least progressing in the right direction and won't be ready to go sooner rather than later.
Well, good to hear. Always good to hear a young talent is getting better and getting ready to get back out there on the court, which is exactly where we want to see him. Keith, had a lot to cover today. For media day has not come yet, and we've already got Ben
I
Simmons
know.
madness, everything going on here, the Nets story, the salary cap, all this stuff. So a pretty packed show here. And just an example of the stuff that we're going to be covering all season long here for the NBA front office show. So if you're not subscribed yet, make sure you do subscribe. If you listen to the podcast version of this, make sure you subscribe over on Apple
Yep.
Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you do listen to podcasts. Keep those numbers
Please
just
do.
keep going up on our YouTube channel. Man, I can't wait to hit our next milestone.
I love it. 15K. Let's keep pushing there. And we've got some really cool stuff planned for
Mhm.
the season this year. We're really excited. So we're ready to go. We're going to be in it. We're going to be hearing from us on a very regular
That's
basis.
right.
Well, once the season gets going here, which is unbelievably less than a month away. A month from today, we will be 2 days in, which is really crazy.
I'm ready for it. I'm ready. I know when the time comes, I'm going to be saying, I'm so busy. This is crazy, but I love that. I want to be busy like that. I want to be running
Agreed.
around like crazy and just loving
Yep.
basketball. So can't wait for that
Yep.
to get going. I think that'll wrap things up for today's show. Everybody out there, make sure you do stay safe, and we'll see you next time.